You're now live on YouTube.
Good evening, members. Good evening, officers. Good evening, many members of the public that have joined us. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. I'm unreliably told that Christmas Day is 100 days from now. Firstly, welcome to the Planning Applications Committee, 17th September. Firstly, can we have apologies?
Thank you, Chair. I've received an apology from Councillor Colin Dugan. Councillor Paul Deach is substituting for him.
Thank you very much, Councillor Deach, for joining us again. The minutes, are you agreeable if I sign the minutes of the last meeting? There is one on your copy that you have, or on the copy I've got, you may not have paper. On page 11, there's a word crept in that has been altered. I think that is thank you to, who was that? It was Councillor Tapper that picked that one up first. So thank you, Councillor Tapper. Are you agreeable I sign those minutes?
Agree.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to the first item on page 13, Heath Park Drive, Windlesham, tree preservation order. Are there any declarations to make on that item? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I've had various conversations with the Heath Park Wood Action Group and also conversations with the wildlife organisation that have been involved in that site.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheeler. Any others? Councillor Whitcroft.
My declaration is the same as Councillor Wheeler in that I have had correspondence with the action group.
Thank you. Councillor Mansfield, I'll take, it's not, as you're not on the committee, but did you waive a declaration there?
No, I just want to sorry, I've just come in on Zoom, just to make it clarify that I do wish to speak, however, on items 7 and 9. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I have that. Appreciated. No further declarations. Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Waiting for the IT to catch up. It's not seeming to move.
I want to go to the next slide.
Yes, please. The item is relating to a tree preservation order that was made in March of this year on the land to the east of Heath Park Drive, which is part of Heath Park Woods in Windlesham. Hopefully we will get the next slide, please. This is the plan of the order as made. Next one, please. The reason I'm showing this slide is you'll see from the update sheet that we've received representations from Mr. Robbins just to confirm that he is part of the Windlesham Heath Park Wood Group. He has made representations about the land to the north, which you can see north of the developable area on this layout plan. This is similar to a representation I've received from a Mr. Murphy, who is also a resident of Heath Park Drive. The gist of their correspondences relates to land to the north of this site. The purpose of this slide is to show what the developable area is. Land to the north is not subject to a threat from development at the moment. Next one, please. Just to put it into context, you will see Heath Park Drive. It's a bit tricky because I can't point at the moment. You can see St Margaret's Cottage, so it's to the west of that, west and north of that. The parcel of land that's vacant between St Margaret's Cottage and Woodlands, which is the little house in the woodland. Basically, that is Chamness. So the purpose of the TPO that we have made is because we believe that there is either an application, which we know, which is to reserve matters for the Heath Park Woods site that was allowed on appeal, and we're also aware of likely development pressure on Chamness and their desire to cut the trees down, because obviously they have applied for a felling licence, which was subsequently made void by the Forestry Commission. The issues that we have considered, including all the representations we have received, are set out in the report, and the recommendation is to confirm the tree preservation order as made, please. Thank you. Is there another picture?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one more, and this is just an aerial shot of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we take that back, members, are there any comments to make on this? Councillor Deach?
Actually, Chairman, if I may raise a point of order, could I ask officers to sort the tech out, please? Because, you know, it's really difficult to see that map. No pointer or anything like that. You know, I think that members are entitled to be able to see exactly what it is that officers are referring to. So if I could ask in for future meetings that they sort the tech out, please.
Are there any comments of a planning nature regarding this item? Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Chair. It was just really, I suppose, for a point of clarity that the tree preservation order won't actually prevent any development on the site. It just means that the developers need to come back into the planning department for permission to fell the trees in line with the planning that's been granted upon appeal. Am I right in that clarification, please?
Mrs. Bishop?
Yeah. As set out in paragraph 11 in the report, the making and the confirmation of the order does not mean that tree removal will not be permitted. What it is, as it sets out, is a mechanism for the local authority to retain control. Also, with regard to the scheme that was allowed on appeal, as set out in the report, find that there. Basically, it is acknowledged that there will be tree loss on this site. The purpose of the tree preservation order is to ensure that any tree removal on this site is managed in a responsible way in the interests of landscape, biodiversity and climate change.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. That was a helpful clarification. Any other comments? No. Councillor Mansfield, do you have your hand up or are you resting?
No, Mr. Chairman, not at all. Resting.
Thank you for that. If there are no further questions, we are to confirm the order. Proposer and seconder to confirm.
Yeah.
Proposer, seconder, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Wheeler. Are we all in agreement? If not, Mr. Scott, do you want to go through them all?
Yes, we can do.
Right.
I think
Mr. Scott will read out the names if you can confirm or otherwise, please.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agreed.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Councillor Charlotte Morley,
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry,
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Rataram,
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise,
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper,
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler,
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft,
Agreed.
and Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is unanimous. On to item 2 on page 39. Make sure I get them all right. Land adjacent to Chobham Farm Cottage, Philpott Lane, Chobham. Are there any declarations to make? Can you take us back to the screen, please, first? Sorry. Right, we're back. Councillor Wheeler.
I have been contacted by some residents and also have had communication from Chobham Parish Council. Obviously, as per rules and regulations, I come to the committee with an open mind.
Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I have also been contacted by a resident and likewise come to the meeting with an open mind.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. And then it's Mr. Killan.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. So the application site is outlined in red and comprises a single-storey dwelling with basement, recently constructed as set out in the planning history in section 3 of the committee report. And the next slide, we have the proposed site plan. The existing house is outlined in gold and planning permission is sought for a single-storey side extension as shown to the northeast. And the next slide, you'll see a closer shot of the proposed roof plan, again with the existing house outlined in gold and the proposed extension on the left-hand side. So the next slide shows the extension again in floor plan and elevation form on the left-hand side. It would integrate with the form of the existing side elevation and then reduce in height outwards with set-ins to the front and the rear. The next slide shows a couple of photos of the existing house, front elevation on the left-hand side, and then we have the existing side elevation on the site of the proposed extension. The extension is not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt as it is supported under paragraph 145 of the NPPF. As an extension that is not a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building. Although recently built, the approved dwelling on this site falls within the definition of original building as set out in the NPPF and as quoted in page 42 of the committee report. The proposal is considered acceptable in all other respects as set out in the report, and the recommendation is therefore to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wheeler, I see you called this in. Would you be kind enough to explain to the committee why you called this item in? Thank you.
Absolutely. I called it in as I'm afraid I was concerned that it was overdevelopment within the Greenbelt at the point the application came in. And I'm afraid I do still feel that it is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. I'd like to go through a couple of points, and actually some of these are covered very eloquently in the representation that came forward from the parish council. So first and foremostly, permitted development rights on this property when the permission was granted were removed in order to make sure that there wasn't creep of overdevelopment within the Greenbelt. When the permission was given, it was actually given on the basis that the built form shouldn't be much greater than the stable block that was already there. It is already quite a bit greater than the stable block that was already there. By going underground, if it was not concreted on top, but was grass area on top, there would be additional soak away. And in fact, this development, instead of removing all of the spoil from the development, that spoil has to a large extent remained on site. So the actual height of the land is greater than the original height of the previous building. And I'm afraid that I do have to disagree with the officer, and I apologise, that actually if we look at page 42 of the report, it states, and I'll read it for those that can't find it quickly, original building is defined as the building as it existed on the 1st of July 1948, which in this case were stables, or if constructed after the 1st of July 1948, as it was built originally. Now, to my mind, that reads that it should be the original size of the stables that were there before. And also, if I could ask for clarity from the officer, again, on the point that was raised by the parish council, that there is a discrepancy on two different houses, both claiming that a part of built form belonged to them. So I appreciate that it's a matter of interpretation in terms of what is the original built form, but I read that statement quite differently, I'm afraid, to the officer. And I'm unhappy that we haven't had a further flood report, because a basement should have soil on top of it and there should be soak away. And I know that the stables that are next door to this, the land that move on from the stables, feel that they have definitely suffered more greatly from increased flooding. And so, and again, if he could come back with, I know that time and time again in the chamber, we remove permitted development rights, so that when it comes back in with what I've recently learned, the misunderstanding that by removing those rights, we will stop any further development, which would take it over and above what was an acceptable additional built form, particularly within the green belt. And that obviously isn't being exercised in those cases. So I'm afraid that on this occasion, for the reasons that I've outlined, and I will obviously wait for the responses to come back from the officer, I don't feel that I can currently support the officer's recommendation for acceptance.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Mr. Cullen, do you want to respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, in terms of how this proposal should be assessed, permitted development rights were removed with the previous permissions, and that the aim of that is to control extensions that otherwise wouldn't need planning permission. So, for instance, if you look at the approved floor plans, if the house had full permitted development rights, it could extend on both sides and to the rear without needing planning permission. So if we didn't remove permitted development rights, the approved house would actually be able to be considerably extended in footprint above ground without needing planning permission. So I appreciate there may be a misconception that removal of such rights removes any further development proposals, but that is not the case. Once a development is substantially complete, as now is the case here, we do have to consider proposed extensions under the NPPF as to whether they're not disproportionate. So hence we have at this stage a recommendation to grant, but at an increase of 30%, I would say it's unlikely that we would support any further proposals. In terms of the other concerns raised with the land level raising, I'm not aware of any approval of site levels as part of any of the planning permissions. So again, we have to refer that to enforcement and potentially the Environment Agency to investigate. There's reference to previous stables. I've checked the previous figures, and the approved has an 8% reduction from the stables and the garage, which I do accept was part of Chobham Farm Cottage, the original house, but there was a change of ownership, and I was also aware, obviously being the previous case officer, of an issue with that building being double counted, but that was identified, and we have refused proposals where that has been the case. So there is no longer any double counting, I can assure you. And so on that basis, the recommendation for the site extension is to approve. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler, did you want to come back on that, or I was going to say, are you satisfied? But I won't.
No, as I said, certainly from the research that I've done, the original building should be the stable building, which was lower than and smaller than, so and not the building as it currently exists in its extant form. So we just have to agree to disagree, I'm afraid, on the interpretation of that.
Noted. Councillor Rice, were you?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just regarding a comment the officer made regarding potential future development and that it would most likely be refused. Can the officer explain what process would be used to therefore refuse future applications? Because as far as I can read, the obviously paragraph 145 of the NPPF is very vague in its use of just saying does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. I'm just wondering, what is a disproportionate addition, if that could be explained? What is the level of cutoff?
Thank you, Chair. In the NPPF, there's no precise definition of that. I know it's unhelpful. It doesn't give a percentage, so it is a case-by-case assessment. But we look at matters such as footprint, volume, height, the perception, its appearance, visual impact. So this proposal as a 30% above ground increase is considered to be not disproportionate. And that is, generally speaking, a rough ballpark figure that we consider to be acceptable. But as I said, we don't have a precise percentage, and I know it's not, that's not the easiest way to assess these things. But as I said, there's no percentage or definition given in the NPPF. It is a case-by-case assessment. But as I said, we have a kind of a ballpark aim of in around 30%. That in this case is considered acceptable. Thank you.
Councillor Alloway.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the officer, please, if the original application for this dwelling would have been submitted, including the extra 30% proposed, would it have been refused?
Thank you. Yeah, if it came in as a new house that's 30% bigger, it would fall under a different NPPF test and it would have to be refused. But now, as you can see from the photos, what has been given planning permission has been substantially complete. So as a matter of law, we have to assess this proposal as an extension, and have to decide whether it is disproportionate or not. And for the reasons outlined, we consider it to be not disproportionate. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
I just want to clarify that. So if he put the planning permission in for this building as it is now, we'd refuse it. But we've accepted the first planning permission, and now when it comes in with this extension, we're now potentially accepting it. So it's the same size, but potentially it will be acceptable, whereas the original one wasn't. I just want to just clarify that in my head.
Yeah, thank you. That is correct. I mean, I think that there's one difference in that there's now a new chapter in the planning history now that the new development has been built. So now we're looking at a 30% increase from the original building, which I've already tried to explain is generally speaking a ballpark acceptable figure. So that is the key difference. If it was accepted as just a new house that's 30% bigger, then someone could apply to increase further again, and so on and so forth. So it is just the way that the NPPF is written, but it does still allow for control over the size of development. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, members, we can only look at what's in front of us, what may not, what might have happened and what may happen. And we have to look at what is straight in front of us, as we all know, although that is an interesting background. Are there any other comments? I'm just looking across. Councillor Barnett, were you indicating there?
Yes, please. Yeah, just dwelling on the bit that you just said, it's also interesting to note that the original application for that dwelling was for a 4-bedroomed bungalow. You can see that from floor plans right back to 2002. So it's interesting that he's now applying as a 2-bedroom to go to a 4-bedroom on a massive, great building with also an enormous basement, which could probably accommodate 8 bedrooms. But anyway, I wanted to just go back to the flooding thing. The officer said that it's now being referred back to the environmental agency. So, I mean, what's happening to that now? I would have thought the application should be delayed until we have a report back, because according to the information I've been given, most of the dugout basement was just spread across the land, raising it to about another foot or so, and a lot of hippo bags full of junk was buried illegally under the ground. And that clearly with such a large building plus raised ground, it's not surprising that the neighbours are getting flooding problems. And I would have thought this is a really serious problem. It's in a floodplain anyway, and I would have thought it's pretty insane to build a low dwelling single bungalow with a huge basement in a floodplain in the first place.
Thank you, Chair. So the planning permission for the house site is just outside the designated flood zone. I appreciate that the land to the rear is in the flood zone. As far as I'm aware, that the concerns raised about land level changes have been referred to enforcement and potentially the Environment Agency as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the details in front of me tonight, but so I'll just have to chase that situation and see ensure that it's investigated properly.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Just would like confirmation that the extension actually sits on top of the existing footplate of the building, and therefore does not add to the potential flooding area. In other words, the rain that would fall on the land that is there, i.e. the basement, would be exactly the same as falls on the roof of the building extension built on top of it, and therefore that the extension would have no different impact on the flooding potential for the land as the current building does.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the proposed extension is to be sited entirely on top of the basement underground. So in that respect, there's no spread of development across the site. Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Just to come back on that point, obviously the basement would most probably have had grass and soft landscaping on top of it. So it wouldn't have had a building and a roof. So there is a very slight difference in terms of that particular area and the amount of absorption, etc., that one might get.
Yes, Councillor Tapper.
Yes, I accept that point, that it would have been grassed over, but as we can see from the pictures that have been provided, the roof of the basement is virtually at ground level, and therefore any layer of grass or earth on top of that would have been very thin indeed. I doubt whether it would have made any substantial difference whatsoever to the flooding that might have occurred. Perhaps that can be confirmed by the officer.
Yes, due to the nature of the basement, it was, even if it would be fully subterranean, the structure wouldn't be very much above ground level. So, just practically speaking, lead to its own limitations. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, we have an officer recommendation. Is there a proposer and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Councillor Tapper, opposed. Councillor Betton, second. All those in agreement, and Mr. Scott will run through the list, please. Thank you.
Voting on the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Against.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Against.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
In favour.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
In favour.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Valerie White.
In favour.
Thank you, members. That has been agreed, 10 votes to 5. On to item 3 on page 51, Camberley Theatre. I will give a group declaration on this item as the property was in the ownership of Surrey Heath Borough Council. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to also say that I'm one of the council's representative to the Surrey Heath Arts Council, which is heavily involved in the Camberley Theatre. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be said. I just want to cover my base.
Well, but thank you for mentioning it. It's not as a council representative, but thank you for joining that, because I've enjoyed being on that in the past. Any other declarations? No. Mr. Killan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, here we are just down the road at Camberley Theatre. The application site is focused on the front entrance. The next slide shows photos on the left. Photo on the left-hand side, existing glazed canopy that was a 1990s addition to the theatre building, which, as you can see, has retained a lot of its original 1960s features. On the right-hand side, you have the High Cross Church. The next slide shows a couple of more photos showing, just go back one, please, sorry. Cafe extension on the left, the Ian Goodchild Centre just behind. And then you have opposite the Knoll Road street scene. So the next slide shows what the proposal is. It's for a replacement aluminium canopy shown on the bottom, along with external fenestration alterations along the front elevation. The next slide shows the proposed site plan. Hope you can see at the front that the curved line is the outline of the canopy, which is designed to add some interest and drama to the front of the building. The existing steps and ramp up to the theatre will remain unchanged. So if we can move back one slide, please, to the elevations. The design and scale is considered appropriate for this location. It recognises the importance of the site as a civic building and one of the focal points of the town centre. It would complement the urban regeneration of the town centre and has the support from our urban design consultant and the Theatres Trust. It is considered it will assist in drawing more people to the building and support the theatre's overall viability and role as a cultural asset. The recommendation is therefore to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to thank you. Thanks, Joe. Right, members, anybody got any comments on this one? Just trying to see if there are any. Yes, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question of clarification, please, officer. It says about the render carrying on to the in-child centre as well. Does that mean that the render is going to be the same across the whole front, including the cafe and the child centre as well?
Not in pictures.
It mentions it will go across the Ian Godchild Centre, but it doesn't show it as being the same all the way to the front.
My reading of the pictures shows just over the main entrance with the sort of the doors and the glass panels either side, and the cafe has got but it does say proposed front elevation, has got the long window on it.
The existing cafe has a white render. I think the initial proposal, was for like a white or off-white render for the main frontage and the cafe. I think that's no longer proposed. There's a different type of material is now proposed on the front, and it's subject to a planning condition for involving a pre-commencement site meeting with our urban design officer. Obviously, the existing tiles have issues and have become loose and are safety issues. So we want to ensure that the most appropriate design at the point of the removal, so we can gauge the condition of the original fabric. So I don't think it actually includes the cafe building or the Ian Godchild Centre.
It's just that the note says render to also continue round front of adjacent Ian Godchild Centre. That's why I queried it, because just to see if it was going to be the same all around. But it was just a query more than anything else, to be honest, to see if it's going to be the same all the way along or it was going to be looking different.
It's the white render. The white render comes round on the front. So basically, my reading of this, we get rid of the how do I put it? Less than startlingly attractive tiles on the front.
Yes.
So can I put it that way?
Yeah.
As one of our buildings, we have to be nice about it. Yeah. So we'll get a nice white render, which will be seen through all the works going out from Princess Way and the High Street. And I must say, I was down there today, and it's looking very nice, Princess Way. And then it carries on round to that white render on the.
I think the final colour may be different from the white render, because
white.
We're looking to draw the eye towards the theatre. I think the initial proposal was all the same colour, but we felt further to the advice of our consultant, we felt that something a bit more interesting could be achieved. So as I said, it is subject to a pre-commencement meeting and the planning condition, just to confirm that it's appropriate for the existing fabric of the building.
Fine, thank you very much.
Can I ask, just out of just as we've got this in front of us, at some stage when we got the colour, can we just have a note sent round, just out of interest, just to keep everybody in the loop? We might, if somebody suggests shocking pink or something, we might all come back and I don't know. It was very nice shocking pink. Did I see Councillor Perry wanting to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. As Ward Councillor for this area, I welcome this development very much. It's a show of confidence in our town centre, and I'm sure it'll be well received by all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on this item?
Sorry, Chair, can I just say that condition 4 is actually a pre-commencement condition for the to confirm the materials. So it will, as a matter of course, come in as an application for review.
Okay, I haven't read that bit. Oops. But anyway, so it does come back to us. Look forward to that one. Right, propose and second. I will propose this. There's a second to Councillor Rise. And again, we need to go through the process, please.
Voting on the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agreed.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
In favour with jazz hands.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Oh, yes, I am. I couldn't resist it.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darrell Ratteram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. On to item 4 on page 65, 24, the close light water. Declarations on this item, please. Mrs. Bishop. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a single-storey rear extension following the demolition of the existing conservatory. As you can see from the floor plans on the right of the screen, you can see the footprint of the conservatory, which is on the boundary with the adjoining neighbour. And to the far right, you will see the proposed single-storey rear extension with a hipped, pitched roof. Next one, please. Here we go. We've got, as you can see, existing and proposed elevations, both from the rear and both sides. Next one, please. Here are elevations. So this is looking from standing in the close across to the side of the house. And then you've got the 2 pictures to the right, where you can see the house, which has been previously extended 2-storey. Across to the common boundary with the adjoining neighbour. As members will note from the committee report, we had received objections from the neighbour, but they have been withdrawn by email, and the recommendation is to grant. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Bishop. First off, Councillor Mansfield, I lost you. There you are. Councillor Mansfield, you indicated you wish to address the committee on this item. Can I please say on those watching that as a councillor you are able to address the committee. However, in this instance, you are not a member of the committee and do not have a say in the final deliberations. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the committee. I understand what the officer has said in regards to this particular application, and I have full respect for the officer's comments. However, I've called this in on behalf of the residents on the grounds that they are elderly residents, and due to their health problems, they were unable to join the Zoom meeting tonight. I had several meetings with the residents, that is the neighbour living next door to this property, who has serious concerns about the effect on their health and well-being as regards the light and the loss of light that they will have on their property. I understand and accept the, to a certain degree, the officer's recommendation. However, I would like to ask as to whether this could be deferred in some way for further review on the loss of light to the elderly residents living next door. I have been, this planning application has been going on for some time, and I visited the occupants of the residents next door because of their concerns. I am not the ward councillor for Lightwater. However, during the pandemic, they contacted me as an associate member of the council, and I visited their premises under obviously social distancing to discuss this issue. I also have serious concerns about under the area that wishes to be developed, where the extension is to go, is actually a foul drain, and the unintended consequences that could be brought about because of this development on neighbouring properties. So I would just like to highlight that as a point of record, just from the point of view of any unintended consequences. But I would refer back to the main point, which is the loss of light and the effect on the health and well-being of the immediate neighbours should this development go ahead. Thank you, members, for listening.
Councillor. Can you just bear with us? We're just going to discuss that.
Just clarify that it's regulatory, not Councillor Mansell.
Yeah. Just while they're doing that, just for the record, and for whilst members have this in front of them, for reference to anybody watching, this item was in fact, the committee were asked to determine this item by the executive head of regulatory, and it was brought to the committee at that request. Mr. Bishop.
Yep. Thank you. The first thing I would like to just bring to members' attention is I have an email dated the 3rd of May from the neighbour, and they clearly state, please note that after 2 days of emails and communications with Mark Harding, proposed with the above plans, we withdraw all objections hereof. We are not opposing the drainage. We are not opposing the revised extension plans and are now satisfied with his intentions. We are no longer opposing these plans due to Mr. Harding having revised the original plans and being helpful and communicative. We have had 2 days of emails and texts and have decided his fair and honest approach gave us confidence in his intentions and fairness. So that was the representation that we had directly from the residents at 23 The Close. With regard to the proposal, for the reasons as set out in the report, the impact on the neighbour has been assessed and in planning terms has been found to be acceptable. I would also draw members' attention to the fallback position that they have. As you will see from paragraph 3.3 in the report, they have got a certificate of lawfulness for a single-storey rear extension, and you'll note that on the boundary, the eaves height is identical to the current proposal, and it had a slight increase with a fully hipped roof as proposed. So the recommendation remains to grant members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bishop. Members, are there any comments? Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I know the answer. I just want to ask: is being reported to the committee at the request of the executive head of regulatory, is there a reason for that, or is it just that that was within the executive head's powers to bring it before committee?
Mr. Partington.
Yes, I think because of the nature of the objections originally, I believe that the executive head felt it was necessary to bring this forward to committee. And correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Mansfield, but I believe you originally put the call in request in, but then that may have been out of time. So in those circumstances, the executive head still has the power under the committee scheme to call the matter forward.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just an observation that the rear extension, according to the plans that we can see here in the agenda, is of a hipped roof construction, which is, as far as any construction on the boundary with the neighbour's property, virtually identical to what's there already. If the construction had been a gable end construction, I could understand the argument about loss of light, but as it's a hipped construction with the roof angled away from the adjacent property, I can't see that there's any difference there to what they already have.
Yeah, and Councillor Tapper, you're rather confirming what Mrs. Bishop said in relation to the roof construction and height and the impact of that roof, which is absolutely right. Any other comments? I'm looking along the lines. No. Members, we have an officer recommendation. Is there a proposer and a seconder? Proposer, right, Councillor Perry, Councillor Tapper, and then Mr. Scott, please. No peace of the wicked.
Voting on the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agreed.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Robin Perry.
Agreed.
Councillor Darrell Ratteram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
In favour.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
In favour.
Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is unanimous. On to item 5 on page 77. Land to the side and rear of 154 Guildford Road, West End. Are there any declarations to make on this item? Councillor Rise.